nutrient timing, which was released around the time as macrobolic nutrition in the early 2000s, 2004, I
Mhm.
said. It's also got a bunch of like outdated, as far as I can tell, information. I bought these books not knowing when they were published, trying to update my nutrition uh, knowledge. So the one sentence summary I have here: muscle recovery and growth occur fastest when the right nutrients are consumed at the right times in relation to training. I mean, that sounds right, but I think your perspective is if you're eating a good diet over the long term, nutrient timing isn't that important.
Yeah, so I think this book emphasized the pre-post window a lot, especially the post-workout anabolic window, and framed it as if it's like more what's now sometimes known as the anabolic peephole, where they kind of think it's like 1 hour that you have to get all of your nutrients in, and then the muscle uses it. And otherwise, if you waste that window, it's like muscle doesn't care anymore, so you're not getting jacked. So this book actually caused, well, it's weird because this book had so much influence that people started paying tons of attention to nutrient timing, and tons of research was done on this topic. And then most of that research found that the overall message, like after the workout, you have to slam down huge amounts of dextrose and whey protein, and probably also before the workout, maybe also during. And that's like one of the most important things. And the supplement industry, of course, loved this. They went on this full force and started promoting this message as well. And then there was kind of a counter movement as more and more research surfaced that these things, they don't matter that much, to the point that now actually originally with If It Fits Your Macros, there was a counter movement that basically said nutrient timing doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And just everything, as history usually does, the pendulum swung from one extreme to the other. Before now, I think, in the reasonable part of the fitness community, we've settled on it matters, but there are conditions and certain scenarios, certain things matter, certain things don't matter. In an extreme, saying that nutrient timing doesn't matter is ridiculous, because then you would basically be saying, well, if you just have one meal per week, you're good. It's all about the total intake. And of course, nobody actually believes that.
Okay. So yes, that's correct. This book is about energy phases, 10 minutes prior to and during a workout. I'm not going to go into it. If anyone who ends up watching this wants to, I'll put a link in the bio. But the energy phase is very strict. The energy phase, and then they say what nutrients you should take and what amounts, pretty detailed. And then we have the anabolic phase, which is 45 minutes after the workout. They're saying a carbohydrate protein supplement.
Just like, how much vitamin C do they recommend? Because that's super interesting that they put that in there. Okay,
Yeah.
It's funny because actually current research shows that at least in too high amounts, vitamin C is harmful because it has the same effect, vitamin E as well, as the COX inhibitors that we talked about before. So they would suppress the inflammatory signal too much. So I would say that pre-workout is probably the worst possible timing to supplement vitamin C and E.
Yeah. Okay. Then we got the anabolic phase, which says there's a 600% improvement in protein synthesis and 100% improvement in muscle glycogen replenishment. That's almost like if you're taking steroids, those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, compared to being fasted, I think those numbers are probably accurate. I think the increase in muscle glycogen replenishment is actually a lot larger. It's more like 600 as well, if not even greater than this. But this is compared to being completely fasted.
And this has already been settled as far as we know in 2023. But BCAA is completely useless, somewhat useless, or useful.
Yeah, pretty much completely, because it's the same as what we talked about with protein sources. When you just strip it down and you only get the BCAAs, in many research studies, you don't even get any protein synthesis at all, because the analogy I like to use is that you're trying to switch on a light switch, but there's no electricity. So just consuming leucine is like just consuming the trigger for protein synthesis, but you don't have substrate to actually build it. So it's like you're saying, you're telling your body, hey, build muscle. And then the body's like, yeah, but with what? Like,
got it. Here they're going after the glutamine as well. They're saying a 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 high glycemic carb, which is just like sugars, something that's easily digestible, versus whey protein. So if you have 100 grams of carbs, you'd have 25 grams of protein. That's within 45 minutes after your workout with glutamine. And then here is what they have for that specifically.
Yeah, the glutamine thing is interesting. A lot of people recommend glutamine And there's never been any evidence for it. In fact, if you look at what glutamine does, it's mostly used by the gut. So I could see some uses for digestive health, for example. But especially for muscle building, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. The vast majority of the glutamine is going to be used by the gut and the digestive system. It's not even really that important for muscle growth.
Okay. And then the growth phase where muscle mass and strength occur, that's 18 to 20 hour period. And that comes after the 45-minute period, so after 45 minutes. And then they also split that up into the rapid segment and the sustained segment. Rapid segment is up to 4 hours, but only if activated during the anabolic phase. And they're recommending consuming leucine and glutamine. And then the sustained segment is basically until your next workout, which seems to be the next day here. What do you see in this chart that's good or might want to be avoided?
What I like is that they actually, I didn't know that, I thought they emphasized the immediate post-workout period much more, but they actually do emphasize even 18 hours after the workout, which is good because originally, like I said, the anabolic people hypothesis was essentially that it's this 1 hour or something after the workout that is almost everything. And indeed here they also say something like that you only get the next period if you fuel muscle growth in the first period. Yeah. And researchers actually found the opposite, that the body has a compensatory response. If you're fasted, that it will stimulate anabolic signaling more when you eat afterwards, which makes perfect sense, right? It would be stupid if you hunt for deer as hunter-gatherers, and then because it takes you too long to get home, your body's just not going to repair. Like, there's extra reason to build muscle because there's more muscle damage and more potential muscle loss even. The only question is, can that compensatory signal completely make up for the lost protein synthesis before?
Okay.
Now, that doesn't seem to be the case. So I think you do need to have some pre-workout feeding. And there you need at least 3, maybe 4 if you really want to maximize every little bit of protein synthesis meals per day. If you're sandwiching your workout within a 5-hour intermeal window, the exact timing doesn't matter that much anymore because it takes at least 6 hours after a good serving of protein before protein levels like hyperaminoacidemia, before that even subsides. So you get the nutrients in a very sustained long-term release. And like I said, even whey protein, for example, will take an hour before you get the nutrients. So it's not like, you consume the meal and boom, instantly your body has all the nutrients and muscle protein synthesis goes up. And then a few hours later, it's all gone. No, it's a very slow process. We're talking about multiple hours for every single meal. And most researchers even looked at liquid meals without fiber, without fat. So it's likely that in the context of whole foods-based meals with fiber and fat and intact food matrices, so basically foods that are not processed, you get much more sustained slow absorption. And it is true that you have this phase. You see muscle protein synthesis doesn't actually peak after the workout, as they also seem to be claiming here, but it takes a while. It takes a couple hours before it peaks. And the peak is, well, depending on the person, can be a couple hours later, 6 hours later. And then it lasts a long time. It lasts at least 24 hours in most individuals. It can be a little bit less in advanced individuals. And in some individuals, more than 48 hours. In fact, based on the literature training frequency, it seems that in untrained individuals, it might last a whole week. So that line of research has really undermined most of these arguments. Like 10 minutes before the workout, 10 minutes, nothing's going to come to the 10 minutes. It's, yes, within a 5-hour window, these things matter. 10 minutes never going to matter. Okay. 10 minutes might matter, if you have to make weight after for a UFC match or something, and you have to weigh in, and then an hour afterwards you have to fight. That's a scenario where 10 minutes matters. But for muscle growth, for the average trainee, it's never going to matter. And this also a big one, I think, is that they're recommending a lot of simple carbs and sugars and things to stimulate insulin and everything. And researchers found that that's completely redundant. You don't need the carbs anymore if you already have the protein, because protein, like as you said, also stimulates insulin release. And it only takes a certain level of insulin to completely suppress or to maximally suppress protein breakdown. And adding carbs to that doesn't have a further effect. It also doesn't affect protein synthesis. Carbs have very little effect on protein synthesis. They only decrease protein breakdown a little bit by virtue of increasing insulin levels. But since protein also does that and also stimulates protein synthesis, having enough protein completely makes carbs redundant. It is probably a good idea to also have energy in general, but it doesn't have to be carbs, and it certainly doesn't have to be dextrose that they sell you for the price of steak.
If you're an intermediate or advanced trainee and you already got your nutrition dialed in, are there any hacks around specifically nutrient timing? If there is anything to do with nutrient timing, what would they be for an intermediate advanced trainer?
I think most important is the relatively fundamental things that are not that difficult, meaning 3 meals per day minimum, spread out throughout the day, and 2 of them being around the workout, meaning they sandwich the workout in a 5-hour intermeal window. So if you train at 1 o'clock and you have your pre-workout meal at noon, and then the post-workout meal at 5 p.m., that's fine. And you can also shift the window to directly post-workout and the breakfast a lot earlier, for example, also fine. But it does matter in that sense that just 2 meals a day, for example, is probably suboptimal. And training fasted is almost certainly suboptimal. We have a recent study on that. We also have a study in the works right now where we essentially show this. Can't share all the details, but the general trend is in line with overall research that training fasted is no bueno. So those are more the big picture lessons.
And where can someone find this research you've been referring to throughout this call?
The new study that we're working on, you cannot find yet. The other studies, on my Instagram, I share a lot of them. You can also find them on PubMed, Google Scholar. If you recently, I posted one on Ramadan fasting, for example, where they found impaired strength development and performance. We also co-authored a systematic review on the effect of carbohydrate intake on exercise performance and strength development. And there we also found some evidence that fasted training is bad for performance and probably also strength development. So there's a decent amount of research on these things.